Today we'll be talking about mono components. Mono components is an idea where you can use a single design system for React and React Native. Before we get into it, a quick intro about me. I'm Vilva. Hi. I'm coming from Berlin. I work for a company called Omeo, which was called GoEuro before, and I was working with Sixt. I am more of a front-end developer. I work on the browser, and I do some open source stuff, and mostly I work on React and JavaScript. Okay, let's start. Before we get into the mono components, we'll see why we need mono components. So as a startup in 2019 already, like online presence has become a major important thing. No matter what business you do, you definitely need an online presence in these days. And what do I mean by online presence? I mean the mobile website, desktop website, iOS app and Android app. Without this, you are not considered as a business anymore. What are the problem in having the online presence? As a startup, you want things to move very fast. Like you can't be slow because so many people questioning on you. You have to get your market share. You have to get your customers on board. So much challenges, and you can't be waiting on something. And also, like people who have worked in startups might know, like you might spend a day building a feature. Like you might work late hours. Next day morning, the product manager or the CTO comes. He says like, no need of this feature, build this. And there's like so much of mismatches like when you have multiple teams. And one more thing is like getting developers. If you have to maintain a separate native Android app, native iOS app and a website, you need 3 different teams. And if you are lucky, you can get you can form a team which works on iOS and Android, but still you need 2 different teams. Hiring them and maintaining teams are very hard for any early stage startup. Also, say for instance, there is a feature called feature A, which can be easy to implement in web, but hard to implement in mobile apps. And this will result in inconsistent behavior between web and the apps. And what happens because of this? As an early stage startup or as a startup which is gaining a reputation, you will lose your reputation. Also, you have to spend more on developers and teams. So, what is the solution? Solution for all the problems is mono components. What is mono components? Mono components is an ideology where we build a single code base, and the single code base acts as both websites as well as mobile app using React Native. And we'll be building something very shortly, like a small live coding. And how does this solve the problem? So you are going to have a single code base. That means your features are going to be consistent. You make some change, it's going to be changed across all the platforms. You remove some feature, it's going to be consistent across all the platforms. And when it comes to the teaming, a small team of JavaScript developers alone can manage all the platforms. You don't need to have different teams for different platforms. This actually makes your development very faster and enables your startup go very fast. So let's start the live coding. This is for my reference in case I forget something. So what I have done so far is like when I was waiting, I did 2 things. One, I used create React Native app, the boilerplate, and created a React Native version, and I used create React app and created a web version. First step, I will combine both the things into a single folder. So it's easy to combine web into that. So I moved the public folder and source folder into React Native version, and I'm going to the package.json. In the dependencies, I need my React scripts in additional. I'm just merging both the boilerplates. And copy the remaining config. I am not even reading that. Yeah. So now we are good here. I'll just delete this web version. Let me install the new dependencies in the meantime. So now if you carefully look at this folder structure, here it points to some file within node modules, and if you open that file, so what this file does is, I'll open our, so for React we have something called React DOM.render, which mounts your entire application into the actual DOM. Similarly, this app entry file which is inside Expo, it just imports your app file, the root component, and registers it at the root as the root component. Since we are going to have a common thing, we will for now not need this. So we will rearrange the files first. So within source, I don't need CSS because I'll write my own CSS. React Native does, I mean style components. React Native doesn't support CSS. I'll remove my tests for now. And within source, I'll create a folder called components, within which I'll create a folder called app. First I'll move my web version of app into it. Next, this is my React version. I'll first rename it to app.native.js and move this as well inside this. Add an index file. So now I have created an app component which has two versions of it. One is the native version and other is the desktop version. I'll just for simplifying, I'll simplify it like test web, and in the native test rn. So why have I done this? So when a folder or the components are structured this way, automatically React Native looks for a file with .native extension, and only when there is no .native extension, it starts picking up the file with .js extension. So now we are having two versions of the same app, same component, one for the app and other for the web. And now I'll add my index file, index.native.js. What it's going to do, I'm importing my register root component from Expo and also my app component, and register root component of app. So now my index.native file registered the app component as the root component for React Native, and index file registers my app component as the root component for web. All set. I'll go to my package.json, change the entry file, source/index.native.js. Let's check if it works. Yarn start is for React Native. Okay. I'm opening it in iOS simulator, and yarn start web is for the website. Okay, some issue. Oh, okay. I have removed these files, but I haven't updated it. Cannot resolve app, and in index.js. Cool. I got my test web, and my React Native is still bundling. Test RN. Okay. Now, in a single repository, we have two versions of component. One component is served for React Native and other is served for web. But this is not our end goal. Our end goal is to have a single component which is served for both the platforms. So now we will go ahead and create a design system for it. Ideally, this design system should be a separate repository or package, but for demo purpose I am creating it within this itself. For now, I will create two components. One will be my div, which will have a div.js and div.native.js and the index file to export it. In my div component, I will just export my div tag, and in my native component, I will export my view. And in index, I will import div and export it. Next, I will create a text component for rendering the text. Text.js, text.native.js, index.js. Within text.js, I will export p component. Here, I will export text as default, and in index I will import my text. So now I have created a design system with two components. One is my container, which is view for React Native and div for web, and other is my text, which is text component for React Native and p for web. I will start using my design system in my application now. I will remove my .native file. I will go to my app.js. Instead of using the div directly, I will import the div from the design system, and within which I will import my text from the design system. Test mono component. Now I need to restart my stuff. If you see, the web version already got a hot reloaded, but I need to rebundle this. So, okay, it's appearing in the top above 857. Finally, we have done it. So, now we have a single component which is rendered both in the web as well as in the React Native app. Let me add some style. So now I have added some styles like just some random margin and a background color. If you see here, I just made change in one place and it's getting reflected in my app as well as in the web. This is mono component. Obviously, everything will have some cons. What is the cons in mono components? The UX designer should have enough knowledge to create UX designs that will match all the platforms. That is the first challenge we face when we have to use all this, like this approach. Second, you can't use CSS in React Native. That's a drawback, so you should always fall back to things like style components. Third thing, you can't directly use any HTML tags in your components. Always you should create an elementary version of a component in your design system, import it and use it in your app. This is the third con. And there can be edge cases, like how we had app.js and app.native.js. There can be few components which have to work differently in the web and differently in the React Native version, and there you need to maintain two versions of the same component, like app.js and app.native.js. Also, you should be aware of few CSS properties. For instance, position fixed doesn't work in React Native, so you should not design your components using such CSS properties. These are the cons which I faced when I was using this approach, but overall, when you use this, definitely this solution is scalable as well. I have used it in production. I can't give more details, but it is scalable as well, and as a startup it's highly beneficial. So overall it's good to use there. Also, I am creating a open source design system for this. People interested can ping me and contribute to it. That's it. Thank you.